In our previous modules, we learned about how much you need to save, and then from there we moved on to learning about how to invest in various asset classes directly and indirectly by way of mutual funds. Once the premise of all the asset classes are set and you've understood how these asset classes function and what are the factors to look into it, we are sure that the next question in your mind is how to invest. How to get started, how much money should you put in debt, how much should you put in equity, and how to go about the entire investments. And in this module, that is exactly what we are going to teach you. So before asking the question how, we need to ask ourselves the question why. Why do you need to invest? What is the reason for which you are taking the efforts of taking this course even and learning about investments and then eventually putting your money work hard for you? Then the one major reason to invest is to beat inflation, because your money is losing its value because of the inflation that is biting into it. Inflation basically means the rate at which everything else is becoming expensive or the rate at which you're losing the value of your money. I'm sure you would have heard your parents telling you that they would buy a samosa for 25 paisa when they were kids. When we were in school, we would get samosas for 4 to 5 rupees, and today the same thing costs 15 rupees. The samosa remains same, but the money that you're spending on it has increased, because the value of your money is reducing year on year, and the rate at which it reduces its value is inflation. So if you want to keep buying that samosa every year, you need to invest your money and grow your money so that when you had 25 paisa 50 years ago, you have 15 rupees today. In words of Sam Ewing, inflation is when you pay $15 for the $10 haircut you used to get for $5 when you had hair. We need to make our investments in such a way that they beat inflation, so that we can afford the things tomorrow when the prices of those things also go up. Let's take an example of a movie ticket. Yes, to understand this. Here we've seen that if I had made a fixed deposit in 2010, the value of that fixed deposit would have grown in 2020 to 216 rupees by taking the same rate of 8%, which is our general debt percentage that we consider for our calculations. The 216 rupees FD would be increased to 466 rupees 10 years from now, that is in 2030. But what is the cost of the movie ticket? How is the movie ticket actually moving? Your 200 rupees movie ticket has gone up to 350 rupees in 2020. So yes, in 2010, a movie ticket costed you 200 rupees, and in 2020 today it costs you 350 rupees. And in 2030, by taking the same rate of inflation, it would cost you 600 rupees. So even your amount in fixed deposits is not enough to cover your movie tickets expenses. This example is to give you a perspective that how your investments are growing and how everything else is becoming expensive. You need to invest your money into investment products which are giving you a return which is more than the rate of inflation, because only then your investments will grow at a rate which is higher than the rate at which everything is getting expensive. So a few years later, you will be able to afford things that you can't afford today. Inflation and interest rates has a very interesting correlation. So the interest rates are continuously adjusted by the government because they want to keep the inflation in check. Let's understand how economy or how the government set interest rates to help boost the entire economy and your and mine income, which eventually impacts also the interest rates at which we borrow and invest. So basically, in the 2 years ago when the economy was doing well, your and my income was also doing well, we were spending more and hence the demand for things were high. When the demand for things were high, the things got more expensive. That is, the inflation was rising. And to curb that inflation or to control that inflation, the government kept increasing interest rates, because when the interest rate goes up, the loans becomes expensive and our desire to purchase or spend more reduces, basically controlling the demand. Now in a reverse situation, when the demand for things are bleak, like in the past 1.5 years due to COVID, and in general the economy has not been doing as well, the demand for things have been low, the salary increment of people have been low, their per capita income of the country has been lower, so people have been spending less. So to encourage us to spend more, the government reduced interest rates, so we could borrow at a reduced rate. Now when we borrowed at a reduced rate, it encourages us to spend more, so we take the borrowing, spend more, thus increasing the demand. So reducing interest rates is a way to increase demand. So this is how the government interplays with the interest rate and the inflation, and how they have a correlation with each other. So when there is high inflation, the government increases the interest rates to control it, and when there is a low inflation, basically there's a lower demand for things, the government reduces the interest rates to encourage us to spend more. Well, in a developing country like India, generally there have been an increasing interest rate trend, but as we are moving from developing to developed, we are moving to a lower interest rate situation. However, there are some countries who are facing extreme situations of inflation, where the people are not spending at all and they're only saving the money. So when the government increases the interest rates in a high inflation situation, it encourages us to stop spending the money and go and invest that money. And when the government reduces interest rates, it's doing so expecting that people would stop saving or reduce their savings and spend more. But in some countries, there is a very extreme situation that's happening, which is basically a deflation case, where no one wants to buy anything and they are continuously saving and investing. Yes, we are talking about Japan, where Japan has been facing deflation for 10 years. Because the generic population of Japan is very old and they know that they have a longer lifespan, they tend to save and invest more rather than spending more, leading to a situation of deflation in that country. Basically, the thing is that over there, all the people want to save and invest. They keep waiting for tomorrow, expecting that the prices would fall. In a case of inflation, what happens is that we have this thing that what if the prices rise tomorrow, so we spend today. There is this sense of urgency. Because of the rising interest rate and rising demand, we know that today what costs 150 rupees would cost 170 tomorrow, so let's spend on it today. Whereas in Japan, there is a complete reverse situation where people are like, let's not spend today because tomorrow the prices would go further down. Like there is a constant discount going in the country. And another case of hyperinflation is Zimbabwe, where things got atrociously expensive super fast, and the country has no control over inflation, that the cost of one loaf of bread also increased by 39% overnight. So if you don't buy today, the things would become expensive so fast and so quick. So yes, these are just two extreme situations to explain that how inflation can crazily impact our mindset and make us spend more or save more. So when your inflation is increasing, you know that things are only going to get expensive for you year on year. The idea is to invest your money in such asset classes which beats inflation and gives you more than the existing inflation rate. This will basically help you to have enough tomorrow. Once having enough is taken care of, the next reason where we invest is to create wealth. As we've already discussed that how investing 5 lakh rupees across various asset classes for 30 years would help you create wealth. As you can see in this, that with investing in fixed deposits after 30 years, you would only have 24 lakhs 91,000, whereas if you invest the same amount in real estate, it would be 1.49 crores, and in equity it would grow up to 3.31 crores. That is 27 times more than what it was when you were not investing your money at all. So basically, as you move across asset classes from your cash to gold to equity, your wealth is also getting created more. To give you a pictorial representation, you can see that your orange is for cash and savings, your FDs are your yellow yolk, and equity is your white part of the omelette, which is where the wealth creation is happening. So if you want to create wealth for yourself, you have to invest money across various asset classes. The third reason is to achieve our goal. To basically, when you have money and you invest your money and create more money for yourself, you are giving yourself a choice to do and achieve things, whether it is higher education or buying a car or having that travel every year. If your current monthly income is not sufficient to do that, you need to put your savings aside, accumulate the money, make that money work hard for you, grow that money, and then go and use that money for your goals. After knowing why you need to invest, the next obvious question is that how do I start investing? And generally what people do is that they look at the returns of a particular investment and jump into investing their money into it without understanding and analyzing for themselves that whether they are okay to take the risk that comes with that return. You would see that when people invest their money by just looking at returns, with the first sight of the loss, they withdraw their money. Or there would be people who feel that whenever they invest in a particular asset, they always lose money, but when others do, they don't lose money. If this is something that's happened to you, you know that you are just investing by looking at returns and without analyzing your risk-taking capacity. You need to understand what is your capacity and how comfortable you are to take risk. There is risk in everything in life, from trying that spicy food or going for that run. You know your own capacity and you go for it to the extent you can, right? Where you have a car, whether you are driving that car every day or you are the kind of person who feels that no, I don't want to take my car out, what if someone scratches on it, or what if I meet with an accident, then you know what is your personality with respect to risk. In fact, when you go on travels, if you are the kind who's ready to jump off any other cliff, I mean you are into adventure sport, or you are the person who likes to sit next door and have a lavish food, would also tell you about your own personality. For instance, if you've been a kind of person who's working at the same company, or you've been switching every few years to get or to grab that opportunity or for that increment, also talks about your risk-taking capacity. So when we talk about risk-taking capacity, yes, there are two elements to it. Some of you may say, yes, I want to change that job, but probably I'm not in a situation where I can. Or I want to jump from that cliff, but I have a lot of responsibilities. Or I want to take that car out, but it is my first car ever. So there would be such things in our mind, or for some it would be the other way around. And hence your risk-taking capacity is a function of two things. One, your ability to take risk, and your willingness to take risk. Your ability to take risk is basically your capacity to bear risk or sustain losses without a significant impact on your lifestyle. And your willingness to take risk is basically how willing you are and how comfortable you are in taking that risk. Your ability to take risk is further determined based on your age. The younger you are, the more risk you can take. Amount of wealth. If you have more money with you, obviously you can take more risk because you know that even if you lose that money, it won't have a negative impact on your lifestyle and urgency of your goals. If there is a goal that you want to achieve in the next 1 year, you won't take a lot of risk with your investments and your money, because you are like, it is something that I have to do in the next year. I can't afford to take that risk. But if it is something, say 10 years or 12 years down the line, you may take some risk because you have enough time to make up for any losses. So these are 3 quantifiable factors which helps you understand what is your ability to take risk. So let's understand from the example of Kabir and Imran. Kabir is young, he has his family wealth, so his parents are well-to-do, and he's not really financially responsible for anyone. In fact, in case of any emergency, he can go to his parents for any kind of financial support. And he does not have any urgent goals as such, because everything is kind of set for him. So his ability to take risk is high. Whereas Imran is also the same age as Kabir, but he does not have a lot of money. Also, he does not earn as much as Kabir. On the other side, Imran has a very urgent goal where he wants to publish his poem. So he has a very urgent goal. So clearly Imran's ability to take risk is comparatively lower. So these are some factors which helps you analyze as to what is your ability to take risk. Now let's understand what is your willingness to take risk, or how comfortable you are to take risk. Now this is something which is subject to your upbringing, your background, the things that you're exposed to, and how you've reacted to those things will help you analyze your willingness. Willingness is something which is very subjective and it varies for each individual. Like if you're an entrepreneur or a self-made person, then your willingness would be high, because in business every day you face a lot of risk and you eventually learn to manage that risk. If your source of your wealth, from where are you earning money? Do you have a lot of inherited wealth? So you would have higher risk taking capacity, and a lot of people dependent on you, then your willingness would be lower. Your life experiences in general, how you were brought up. Did you grow up in a family where everyone was a business person? So your risk-taking willingness would be higher, because you've seen people lose money, make money, and so on and so forth. And if you come from a family of people who come from a very service background, you've been brought up with some values where your willingness would be lower. Now it could also be an opposite reaction, where some people, if your parents are very risk averse, you could have a very opposite reaction and be a risk taking person. Hence we say that when it comes to willingness to take risk, it is not something which is defined, but it's each to its own, and one needs to understand that how willing they are to take risk with their money. Let's understand this with the example of Kabir and Imran. So when we talk about Kabir, he has his family business and has family wealth. You would feel that would, has a higher willingness of his risk. But he's always lived a very protected life. He even agrees to get married because he does not want to hurt anyone, right? So we know that Kabir's willingness to take risk is comparatively lower. Whereas Imran is an entrepreneur, he's a self-made person, he's always made his own money, he's been brought up by a single parent. In fact, when in the movie, he chose to pick up the most dangerous sport of all the 3 sports that they go for. So we know that Imran's willingness to take risk is high. So you saw that how in both the cases, one person's ability was high but willingness was low, and willingness was high and ability was low. So it is very much possible that we would have very contrasting things when it comes to these 2 situations. Similarly, when you put your money without analyzing your risk-taking capacity in any asset class by just looking at the returns, you would be physically, mentally and financially exhausted, the way you would be exhausted if you're running 21 kilometers without practicing. And that is where analyzing your risk-taking capacity becomes extremely important. So let's understand that how this ability and willingness to take risk can be contrasting across people. To help you understand this further, we've taken an example of Simran, who's 25 years old, and Dadaji, who is 60 years old. So you see that Simran's ability is high. So let's go through Simran's background. She is young, she has money that is self-made, and she has family's wealth, and she does not have any urgency of goals. So her ability to take risk is higher. Her willingness, however, is lower because she is a salaried individual. Her source of wealth is through her employment, and she does not have as such a lot of risk-taking experiences of life. So overall, her ability is higher, but her willingness is low. On the other case, when it comes to Dadaji, who's 60, his age is high. He has wealth which is self-created but limited, and he is looking at a retirement right now. So his urgency of goals are very high. So his risk-taking ability is lower. Whereas when it comes to willingness, he's very willing to take risk because he's an entrepreneur who's made his own money. He has 40 years of work experience, and he's done a lot to create his wealth. So his willingness is high, but his ability is very low. So one thing over here is that in such a situation, your ability to take risk will override or should override your willingness to take risk. So in this case scenario, in case of Simran, where her ability is high but willingness is low, same as Kabir's, you can still work on your willingness through consultation and financial education, where more awareness will help you to be more willing to take risk, and you can slowly over time start investing in high risk assets. But in a situation where your ability is low and willingness is high, could be very dangerous because you don't have that kind of money and you don't have that kind of support to take high risk. But just because you're willing to take higher risk, you may jump into some decisions which could be disastrous for you. Hence, one needs to be very cautious and invest based on both these things, basically based on your risk tolerance level. And how do we get to know our risk tolerance level? We have a tool to know your risk profile, which has a few questions based on your ability and willingness. And once you go through the tool and answer your questions, the tool will throw the right risk profile for you, which you can use and invest accordingly. So let's go through the risk profile tool and understand for ourselves that how much risk we can take. As you can see in this tool, again you can edit only the boxes which are highlighted in gray. So basically you just have to write your score as 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 depending on the option you select. So you have the question and you also have an explanation to the question. So you can take your time, go through it, understand what that question means and select the answer appropriately. The first one is, what is your current age? So just select that. And on an average, what is your monthly investable surplus? Basically, how much is your savings? How much in a month are you saving? When you're investing in equity related products, what would be your time horizon? So you need to answer these questions with an anticipation that if you invest today in equity, for how long will you be comfortable to invest your money for? And are you financially responsible for people and how many people? So just select that also over here. So you can just go here and select your options accordingly. Then the next set of questions are for your willingness to take risk. Basically, what is your practice in saving money? Are you the one who save regularly or whenever possible, or you are someone who lives paycheck to paycheck and is struggling with your money? Please be honest about these questions. How would you react if your investment of INR 1 lakh becomes INR 85,000 in 3 months? In a situation where you invested your money and there is a loss in the market, how would you react to it? Would you go and sell everything that you have and preserve that much money? Or will you go and invest more money because you know that the market has gone down? Invest based on how you would react when a situation like this comes for you. You need to know that which of the following statements will best describe you. You can choose the right one from the options given. Like, are you the kind of person who understands financial planning very well and you invest in debt and equity based on your asset allocation? Or are you someone who know how to invest in products and are doing that? You read a little bit and you research a little bit and invest. You're not familiar at all, or you don't understand it at all. You can write your options accordingly. Further, the question is, what percentage of your investable surplus would you feel comfortable to invest in high risk asset class, that is equity? So of your entire savings, how much would you be comfortable to invest in equity? So you can select the option. Now, which of the following best describes your investment objective? Why you want to invest? Do you want to have maximum growth with manageable risk? Capital appreciation over a long period of time. Capital appreciation means your invested amount grows over a long period of time. Regular growth and income with medium risk, or generate stable cash flow. So you can choose the option accordingly. And the last question is that if you had 1 lakh to invest in a portfolio with the expected returns in 1 year, in which would it be? Out of these options, out of the 5 options given here, which of the ones would you want your money to move like? Like, would you want your money to go to a maximum of 140 and a minimum of 70? So both are possible. Would you want it in the range of 120 to 85, 112 to 95, 110, or to be, at a more safer range? So you can select your option accordingly. Once you write your answers in this tool, the tool will throw your risk profile to you, whether it's aggressive, growth, balanced, conservative, or defensive. And it will also give you the expected return on your portfolio. So throughout this module 3, we will explain you on how these numbers like your expected return and debt equity proportion will help you make your investment decisions. So do keep a note of these things. You can also access the tool on our website, Risk Calculator. So this tool gives you a good idea on what is your risk-taking capacity, what is your risk tolerance level, and then you go investing basis that. Let me ask you this question to help you understand this. Are you a beach person or a mountain person? Well, if you're a beach person, would you go to Switzerland? Or if you are a mountain person, would you go to Maldives? Obviously, you would go to Switzerland only if you're a mountain person, and to Maldives if you're a beach person. You would select your vacation based on your interest and the kind of person you are. Similarly, you would select your investments based on your risk profile and the amount of risk you can take. To help you take the right decision with respect to your investments, you need to match your risk profile with the risk of various investments. If you see in the risk profile, along with your risk profile, there is a percentage of how much debt and equity you can invest in is also given. So let's quickly go through our 5 asset classes and understand their risk and why are we talking about these proportions. So we've already discussed that there are cash, debt and equity, which are our financial assets, and real estate and gold, which are our physical assets. Amongst these things, cash is not considered for asset allocation. So basically, when you invest for your risk profile, we generally talk about an asset allocation where you invest in these asset classes in a certain proportion based on your risk-taking capacity. At advanced levels of investments, we would be considering debt, equity, gold, and even real estate. But at current level, when we are just beginning, we would be concentrating only on 2 asset classes, that is debt and equity. So out of the 5 asset classes, 1, cash is not considered in either, because cash is where you park your money to eventually invest it into these asset classes to generate money. Cash is like a way to hold on to money. Now under debt, which consists of medium risk and medium return assets, we would have all our existing debt products that we've learned so far, and gold would form a part of it because gold is also medium risk and medium return. Whereas under equity, which is high risk and high return, we would also have real estate. So of the 4 asset classes, gold and debt will be considered in the portion of your debt investments, and equity and real estate will be considered under your equity investments of your allocation. So all the products under debt and gold will form a part of your debt allocation, and all the products under equity and real estate will form a part of your equity allocation. After having these 2 asset classes in place, that is debt and equity, then based on our risk profile, we come to know how much we need to invest in each of them. So if you are a risk profile aggressive, you have higher risk taking capacity, you can take and manage more risk, and hence you can hold more equity in your portfolio. You could invest 90% of your investment amount in equity and 10% in debt. If you are a growth profile, then you can be 70% in equity and 30% in debt. If you are balanced, it would be 50-50, and if you are conservative, you would be 70% in debt and 30% in equity. And if you are a defensive person who is very risk averse and not comfortable in taking any risk, then you go for 90% in debt and 10% in equity. We would always tell you that invest as per your risk profile to have maximum returns based on the risk that you can take. Your objective is to maximize your returns based on your risk profile so that you can sleep peacefully, live peacefully, and also have money working hard for you on the side. If there is a mismatch in these 2 things, it would be like running that marathon and just without being prepared for it, and that is not what we want for you. So let's quickly know what's the risk profile of our investors, Arjun, Kabir and Imran. These 3 investors are going to come in our sessions going forward, and we are going to use this risk profile to help you explain how to invest, set your goals and put your financial plan in place. So Arjun is a growth profile, Kabir is a balanced profile, and Imran is a conservative person. Before you move on to the next session, do take your risk profile and know what is the risk profile that fits your risk-taking capacity, and have that answer in place, because every discussion going forward will help you learn more and more on how you need to invest, not only to achieve your goals but to create wealth by learning to manage your risk. So let's quickly revise the 3 major things that we learned in this session. You have to invest to achieve your goals and beat inflation. The role that inflation plays in eroding our money today. So we need to invest so that we can beat inflation. Risk is a function of your ability and willingness to take risk. So if you feel you're very willing and your ability does not match, you know it's a situation which needs to be worked on. And if it's an other way around where your ability is high but willingness is low, financial education and consultations can help you move towards higher risk-taking capacity. But as of today, invest as per your risk profile. And in the next session, we will discuss in detail on what is asset allocation and how do you use it to make better investment decisions.